Yeah, good morning to you all. So before I begin the today's class, anybody would like to ask any question? So on clay mineralogy or on all classes so far that we have discussed. Any questions?
Good morning, sir.
Yeah, morning.
Sir, last class, thickness of the double layer, that is K now 1 by K, sir. You given one formula, K is equal to epsilon 0 K, that's the formula. But in book it is written that 1 by K.
Yeah, sometimes it is written in K form, sometimes it is written in 1 by K form. But you have to be a bit careful. If it is written in K form, I think they won't apply that of whole power 0.5 on the right side.
Yes, sir.
If it is written in 1 by K, that square root of 0.5 will absent.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, otherwise, whatever the form I have written, that will be fine. If you see K equal to some terminology, whole power 0.5 I have written.
Okay, sir.
Okay. So if you are writing 1 by K, then that square root of 0.5 will go away.
Okay, sir.
Yeah, any other question? Yeah, question from MTech student. So you people are completely silent, not asking a single question. Yeah, can you please switch on your videos, everyone? Yeah, so please try to ask remaining all. So please switch on your videos. Yeah. So until last class, we were discussing about the very fundamentals of the soil mechanics. So that is, we try to understand what is the diffusion double layer to some extent. So very tiny part of the clay mineralogy, so on and so forth. So now today onward, so let us enter into our applied soil mechanics class. So let us start with understanding the shear strength concepts. So regarding the shear strength, you have been covered a whole full chapter during your undergraduate program. In the first class, I also did explain why the shear strength shall be considered only for the soil. So if you recall, that's good. So, but before that, can anyone able to define what is the shear strength? What is the shear strength of a soil? How do you define it?
The shear stress, it can, may I?
Yeah.
The shear stress, it can, before the failure, the amount of shear stress it can bear. That is the shear stress. Before the failure, for shear failure.
The amount of shear resistance.
Yeah.
So, amount of shear resistance. Very good. So, any other definition?
Sir, shear strength is because of the particle interaction or the friction or cohesion between the particles.
Okay. So, this is, somebody want to say the combined effect of cohesion plus friction. Cohesion plus friction.
Sir, it is upper limit. Sir,
Yeah.
sir, it is a upper limit of shear stress.
Upper
Means
limit.
it is a failure stage of shear stress.
Okay. So upper limit of shear stress. Yeah. Any other definition? Yeah. Others, please put the videos on.
So plus interlocking also. Cohesion, friction plus interlocking.
Okay. So cohesion, so friction plus interlocking. Very good. Okay. So any other definition? Okay, so you have also undergone the other things, like, so you have read about planes, shear planes or whatever it is, then principal axis, so principal axis, so on and so forth. So do you know what is the fundamental meaning of all these things? When you say a plane is a principal plane or the axis is the principal axis, what is the condition?
So maximum or minimum normal stress and no shear stress.
Maximum or minimum normal stress, no shear stress. Okay. So instead of the principal axis, I will write principal plane. So principal plane. Principal plane is the plane on which the shear stress becomes zero. Shear stress becomes zero. It's true. So can anybody able to prove how a plane becomes a shear plane? Sorry, principal plane, or how and when the shear stress becomes zero? Okay. So first of all, what is the fundamental meaning of your planes?
So 2D surface.
2D surface. So just for demonstration, I'm taking a small example. So this is X and this is Y, this is Z. So these are the three axes which are orthogonal to each other, or you can say perpendicular to each other. Yeah.
Sir, video is blurred, sir.
Video is blurred. Right? Say it's covering the entire board.
Actually, maybe turn off the video. I think it is a bandwidth problem. I am also seeing blur actually.
Maybe network issue.
Yeah.
The network issue.
Maybe turn off the video, sir. Actually, I am
Watch.
connecting from.
Yeah. Then you can turn off your videos. I'm sorry. You can turn off. Okay, very good. Sorry. Yeah. So now what I'm taking, so I'm taking three axes. One is x-axis, y-axis, and the z-axis. So the fundamental assumption is all are opposite to each other. Now the space between x and y, so this is called as x y plane. So this is x y plane, and this is x z plane, and this is y z plane. So this is y z plane. So if you talk about only the single lines, then you say the axis. While if you talk about the two-dimensional surface, then we say, so this entire thing is called as a x y plane, x z plane, and y z plane. Okay. So suppose if you want to convert this into some cubical object, then you can better understand. So a three-dimensional surface. Okay, so here you can represent now. So depending upon your requirement, you can say, so this is the x-axis, so this is the y-axis, sorry. So this is the x-axis and this is y-axis and this is z-axis. So now you can understand, so what is the plane if you consider the small cube. But usually when I say plane, so it is a two-dimensional object, but the same thing can also be represented in the form of a three-dimensional. So for better representation, so I took small example of the cube. So if you can able to understand, that's fine, otherwise leave it. So just let us stick to only this two-dimensional picture. Anything is fine. Okay. So now once having understood this one, so on these planes, there is a possibility of the stresses or the forces acting in the normal direction as well as in the direction parallel to the plane or normal to the plane. So these are the two possibilities. Say for example, if I take the XY plane, if I want to represent the perpendicular direction, so that should be perpendicular to the board. The normal stress is perpendicular to the board. So while if I want to represent the shear stress, that should be the parallel to the XY plane or X plane or the Y plane. Parallel to X plane or the Y plane. So this is shear stress, while this is the normal stress. Here the normal stress is perpendicular to the board. That is also called as a axial stress. Axial stress. The shear stress, which is parallel to the surface. Now this kind of a normal and shear stresses can act on all the planes. If you take a cube on all 4 plus 2, 6 sides, there can a possibility of normal stress, there can a possibility of the shear stress. However, it is not guaranteed that the intensity of the shear stress and the intensity of the normal stress are equal. So they can be all the different. The intensity of the each normal stress and each shear stress could be different. So that's why normally we say there are 3 planes, sigma 1, sigma 2, sigma 3. That also I will explain. But if you can able to understand what is normal stress, what is shear stress, which is acting on a particular plane, so that is a good enough. Okay. Now let us take the small soil element. So in soil mechanics viewpoint, so let us take small element at a depth of z. This is a ground surface. So this is ground surface. Now on this small element, there acts the normal stress, which is nothing but the overburden normal stress, which is gamma times of z, and there acts the confining pressure. In case of the soil, it is called as a confining pressure. So normally we say this is sigma 3, so sigma 3 and sigma 2. So if we represent anything, the total number of stresses on any given element, so they are 3's, sigma 1, sigma 2, sigma 3, or sigma x, sigma y, sigma z. So if you say, or if you designate in terms of sigma 1, sigma 2 and sigma 3, they are normally called as a principal planes. But which otherwise, if you simply write as a sigma x, sigma y and sigma z, so there are not a principal stresses, but rather they are normal stress in the x-axis plane or in the xy plane, or sigma y means so the normal stress acting on the maybe xz plane or maybe yz plane, depending upon. Okay, so that's the difference between sigma x, sigma y, sigma z. They are simple normal forces or the stresses. But if you designate with sigma 1, sigma 2 and sigma 3, so they are called as a principal stresses, principal normal stresses or simple principal stresses. But suppose if you look at this simple soil element, although in general, so in theory, we represent with the 3 different principal stresses, sigma 1, sigma 2, sigma 3. But when it comes to soil mechanics viewpoint, if you take any infinitesimal small element, the intensity of sigma 3 is equals to sigma 2 or vice versa, because the intensity of the confining pressure in all directions surrounding the soil element is remained same. So when it is same, we can say sigma 2 is equal to sigma 3. Sigma 2 is equal to sigma 3. So, and the only variable is normal stress. Normal stress can vary depending upon the amount of the overburden that exists on the considered soil element. Okay, so now if you look at the any infinitesimal small soil element, so because of uniform confining pressure in all the directions, so we say sigma 2 is equals to sigma 3. So we don't need to distinguish the third principal stress or third principal plane. So that's why we always represent only two number of principal stresses, sigma 1 and sigma 3. Sigma 1 and sigma 3. But if you go to solid mechanics, or if you go to any other material, they may be considering sigma 1 as independent, sigma 2 as independent, sigma 3 as independent. So there is a possibility. Even in our triaxial system, so there is also a possibility of nowadays, so conducting all the, by varying all the three normal stresses independently. So such equipments are available nowadays. Okay. So but for the time being, you assume that sigma 2 is equal to sigma 3. So therefore, there is a uniform confining pressure is acting on the soil element. Now if you take the picture of this one, this small soil element, small element. So this is the element. So since I just now demonstrated sigma 2 is equals to sigma 3, now we can represent in a simplified way this element as, so the element which is subjected to the axial stress, that is sigma 1, and confining stress, that is sigma 3. Confining stress, this is sigma 3. So this is a realistic condition. So, yeah, any question? Okay. Now, depending upon the intensity of these values, now the triaxial conditions arises. So, for example, UCS. In case of the UCS, what is the assumption? Yeah, Nandini Krishna. So, mute yourself.
Confining stress is 0 in case of
So,
UCS.
yeah, in case of UCS, sigma 3 is 0. While in case of the triaxial, say UU or CU or CD, so the amount of sigma 3 is different than the sigma 1. Although sigma 3 is kept constant and sigma 1 is variable parameter. Sigma, although the intensity between sigma 1 and sigma 3 is different. So in remaining all the three cases. So that part we will discuss later. Now here, so this is how the stress is acting. Now the condition is that when a soil element is subjected to simultaneously the axial stress as well as the confining pressure, what would be the where would be the failure plane develops? Is it horizontal or is it vertical or is it inclined?
Usually it is inclined, sir. I mean, in the triaxial test.
Okay, usually it is inclined. Others?
Sir, it is as we have taken sigma 1 is maximum and sigma 3 is the minimum principal stress, it will be 45 degree to the sigma 1 plane, maximum principal plane.
Okay, very good. But what is the inclination? Is it inclined or vertical or horizontal?
45 to maximum principal plane.
Okay, so you mean to say it is inclined. So this is failure plane. So this is failure plane. Okay, so now in your all shear
45.
that's okay. That will come to later. So this is theta. Okay, so this is theta. So now this is the failure plane. So during your undergraduate program, so when you have tried to understand the whole shear strength theory, what you have done? Suppose if applied sigma 1 and sigma 3 are the principal stresses, you are asked to calculate what is the net normal stress and net shear strength that acts on the failure plane. Is it true?
Yes, sir.
On a soil element, sigma 1 and sigma 3, assuming that these are the principal stresses, and by not applying any kind of a shear stresses on the element, nowhere the shear stresses are there on the sides. That's why we can say confidently this is principal stress and this is another principal stress. So when sigma 1 and sigma 3 simultaneously act on the element, now they develops a failure plane for a particular combination of sigma 1 and sigma 3 value. The failure plane develops for a particular combination of sigma 1 and sigma 3. What is that particular combination? So that's what you have understood. Relating equations, sigma n is equals to, what is the equation? How do you calculate the normal?
Sigma n is equal to sigma 1 plus sigma 2 by 2 plus sigma 1 minus sigma 2 by 2 cos 2 theta plus that's it, sir.
So this is cos 2 theta. And how about shear stress? So this is sigma 1 minus sigma 3 by 2 into, I think, sin 2 theta. Okay, so now did you understand? For this particular combination of sigma 1 and sigma 3, there is a development of maximum normal stress and maximum shear stress. Okay, now let us try to understand how to derive these two equations from this one. Anybody could able to do it? Derivation of sigma n and tau cs, normal stress and shear stress on the failure plane.
By resolving the sigma 1 and sigma 3 along the failure plane.
Okay, so just resolve and do it. Okay, otherwise I can tell you another simple procedure. Same resolution concept only. So what I am doing is, so consider same small element. So this was given in some books. So I am just demonstrating the same thing. Say this is sigma 1 and this is sigma 3, or let's take in terms of the forces F1, so this is F3 and this is F3. Okay, so let us take the angle made by this one is 45 degree initially. So you take this as a theta, and this plane, the XX plane, has a area of A. So the XX plane has a area of A. Now if this is the theta, if this is theta, what is the width of this one in terms of A?
A sin theta.
Okay, so this is A sin theta. What about vertical plane? So this is A cos theta. A sin theta and A cos theta. Okay. So now, so you know that for a particular combination of, so the F1 and F3, so they develops sigma n and tau s. So in fact, so here we are representing the in terms of the forces. So we can represent this also, the force in the normal direction, and this is force in the shear strength direction, the perpendicular. So just represent Fn and Fs. Fn and Fs. So now here you resolve these components in horizontal and in vertical directions. Resolve all these forces. Resolve forces in horizontal and vertical direction. Vertical direction, and write in terms of the normal force and the shear force. Normal force and the shear force. So what are the two components of normal force? F1 and F3. So in fact directions also important. So take the directions accordingly. In the direction of Fn, what are the components of F1 and F3? Anyone? What are the components of F1 and F3 in the direction of normal and in the direction of the shear stress directions? Anyone? Subhajit? Hello?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Can you tell?
Just a second.
So resolve in normal and shear stress, shear force directions. Others? Okay, so resolve yourself, so no problem. So once you got these two components, but pay particular attention to the directions. So positive, negative, upward, downward, so right side, left side, so on and so forth. Then only you will get the result. So once you write the F1 component, so maybe F1 sin theta or F1 cos theta, maybe correct or not, just see F1 component plus F3 component. So then this one also F1 component minus F3 component. F3 component. Okay, so now these are the forces. If you want to convert this into stresses, so your sigma n is equal to force upon area. So force upon, so this is the area. While similarly, so sigma 1 equals to F1, so divided by A sin theta. So F1 divided by A sin theta. Similarly, so sigma 3 is equals to, so F3 force divided by A cos theta. So stress is equal to load upon area, force upon area. So this is general definition, stress is equal to force upon area. So in terms of the F1 and F3, sigma 1 is equals to F1 by A sin theta, so that is the width of the top plane. Sigma 3 is equal to F3 by A cos theta, so A cos theta is the width of the vertical plane. So try to substitute F1 as, suppose if you rewrite F1 is equal to sigma 1 into a sine theta, sigma 1 into a sine theta. Then F3 will become sigma 3 into a cos theta, sigma 3 into a cos theta. So this is, so I think, no, this is, whatever it is. So just see it, sine or cos. Okay, so F1 substitute here, F3 substitute here. So then at the end you will get sigma n in terms of sigma 1 and sigma 3. But of course there are other simplifications also that you need to exercise. So this is a very simple derivation. So try to so derive yourself. So there is no problem, because giving all the intricate small details doesn't look nice. So if you simplify by substituting F1 and F3 in Fn and Fs equation and simplify in terms of the trigonometry, so then you will arrive at sigma n is equals to sigma 1 plus sigma 3 by 2 plus sigma 1 minus sigma 3 by 2 into cos 2 theta, and tau s is equal to sigma 1 minus sigma 3 by 2 into sin 2 theta. Okay. Now the other thing also, there is a possibility. So here for an applied principal stresses of sigma 1 and sigma 3, what is the maximum normal stress acting on the failure plane, and what is the maximum shear stress that is acting on the failure plane. Now from these two equations you can understand under what circumstances the normal stress becomes the maximum and shear stress becomes the maximum. So usually we understand in terms of the shear strength, because we are discussing about the shear strength. The shear strength or shear stress becomes 0 when theta is equals to when the shear stress becomes 0.
45.
Sin 45 is
No,
so this
0,
is
I think.
theta is
Sin
45.
0 is 0, sir.
either 0 or 180. If shear stress becomes, oh sorry, correct. If theta is 45, then shear stress is maximum.
Yes,
Okay, theta is 45, shear stress is maximum. And if theta is 0,
shear stress is 0 and sigma n equal to sigma 1 or sigma 2.
okay, so both the stresses, both the principal stresses are becoming equal. Now what is it?
Not necessary.
So this is sin 0. Sin 0 is 0. So shear stress becomes 0 now. So shear stress
Yes,
is
shear stress becomes 0.
shear stress is maximum when theta is 45. Shear stress is 0 when theta is 0. So what do you mean by theta is 0 here?
Sigma n equal to sigma 1 plus sigma 3 by 2.
Now what about this plane, failure plane?
Vertical plane. Vertical plane.
Vertical. Theta is equal to 0. Vertical or horizontal?
What is that?
Horizontal. Horizontal.
It's horizontal, na? It should be horizontal.
I was looking at the other diagram.
This one? Ah, okay, okay. So in this case it is vertical. So in this case it is horizontal. So the way you will consider the theta. So both are correct. So but be careful. So when you are representing. Okay. So this part is clear now. Everyone did understand how to arrive at the sigma n equation and tau s equation. So based on the values of the sigma 1 and sigma 3. I hope this is clear to everyone now. So if you have any questions, please ask me. Okay, so there are other derivations also. So that part also we will consider maybe in the next class onward as well. Okay, so now this part is clear. Now let us come to the most important part, the fundamental definition of the shear strength. So there are two things when you refer to any books that you heard is, one is shear strength and shear stress. Shear strength and shear stress. These are the two things so that you need to remember. So usually if you look at the fundamental definition of the factor of safety in any shear strength book, so it is always defined as the ratio of shear stress upon shear strength. Shear stress upon shear strength. Okay, so let us try to understand what is the fundamental difference between shear stress and shear strength, or how to determine shear stress and shear strength. Okay, so first, now, so we have taken a simple soil mass. So this is the soil mass. So everybody knows that the tau, that is shear strength, is because of two components, cohesion plus, so the normal component. Cohesion, so tau is equal to C plus sigma and tan phi. So therefore, based on this simple equation, everybody tells that shear strength is the combined effect of the cohesion plus the normal force. So the normal force is in the form of a angle of internal friction, so on and so forth. So there is other way around of understanding this equation also. Now if you look at these two terms, so there is a one prominent observation that we can make is cohesion is independent of the applied force. Cohesion is independent of applied force, because this is an independent equation. While the tan phi, the frictional force, is a function of the applied normal stress. That means the friction is dependent on the applied force. Cohesion is independent on the applied force, while friction is dependent on the applied force. But when I say independent or the dependent, how to understand these things in a particular level? So to understand this one, so let us take the free body diagram of a two soil particles, any two soil particles. Now, as we know, suppose if you refer to any the soil mechanics book, and if you see the definition for the cohesion is basically due to two things: cementation effect plus electrostatic force. Cementation plus electrostatic force. Okay, while the angle of internal friction phi is only due to the interlocking effect. So only due to the interlocking effect. So there is no cementation, there is no electrostatic force, nothing. So cohesion is because of cementation plus electrostatic force, the combined effect of these two. Maybe combination of cementation plus electrostatic, or maybe alone of cementation, or maybe alone of electrostatic force. All the three permutations are possible in case of the cohesion. While on the other hand, the angle of internal friction, it is purely due to only the interlocking. There is no other terminology involved in it. Now to make you understand what you mean by the cohesion means cementation. Cementation always exists between the two particles on the external surface. So this is cementation. So this is also cementation. So two particles are cemented each other. Now, well-known example is this cementation is prominently happens because of the calcium carbonate component. Especially if you look at any rocks, so they say the cementation in rocks is due to the calcium carbonate, but there may be other things also. Just a simple example I'm saying. On the other hand, suppose if you look at the clay particles, so maybe because of the formation of the diffusion double layer, which is again due to the electrostatic forces. So they may also induce some kind of the cohesion to the soil mass. So that means depending upon the soil. So the cementation is prominently possible in case of the coarse grained soils, especially if this soil is in undisturbed state for decades or for centuries and centuries, thousands of years. While electrostatic forces, because of the external things, that is a negative charge or something. So now we can understand. So cementation may possible in clay and sands when these clays or the sands are under unperturbed condition for decades and decades or thousands of years. While electrostatic force is only possible in case of the clay particles because of the negative charge. Okay. So in a given soil, so there may be a complete absence of the cementation or the electrostatic forces. In that case, you say the cohesion is 0. Now, if you take a simple sand where there is no cementation, obviously there is no electrostatic force. So therefore, the C becomes 0. But the shear strength exists in terms of the interlocking. Now, when I talk about the interlocking and when I talk about the angle of internal friction pi, so we can talk about or we can consider a wide range value of the pi. So it starts from as low as 0 and we can see as high as even 45, 50. Usually above 40 is possible for the rock masses. Above 40 usually possible in case of the rocks, not in case of the soils. Even up to 40 also for soils it is not possible unless otherwise you take coarse sand. So above 30 may not be possible. So greater than 30 or 32. And for in general sands, maybe fine sand or the medium sand, in general for sands, so the angle of internal friction can vary from 20 to 35. 20 to 35 degrees for sands. So, but if you consider sands alone, only this angle may be possible. But if the sands are a part of the fraction of a whole soil, then your friction angle obviously decreases. Now let us try to understand how the decrement happens. So here I hope the cementation effect is clear to everyone. Now let us take the interlocking. Suppose say, so this is one sand particle and this is another sand particle. If you look at the contact or at the contact between two sand particles, so this is one sand and this is another sand particle. Now, what is the condition here? The friction is dependent on the force. But where the force applied here? So this is a contact force. Nothing to do with the sigma m or contact stress, contact force or contact stress. But this is altogether different than the normal stress. There is no relevance between these two. So here the normal stress can be applied in the form of an external load. So this is sigma n. Now depending upon the intensity of the normal stress that is applied on the sand particle, the angle made between the two contacts, which is responsible for the contact stress, might vary. Suppose here in this case, it is represented as pi. So pi is 90. If the contact force is perfect vertical, but that never possible because you are taking a combination of the soils having the different fractions or the different sizes. So therefore 40 is not possible. Suppose if you look at these values, so in fact in case of the rocks, maximum angle of 45 is possible. So it can exceed even 50 also, but that doesn't matter. But for rocks, it starts from the above 40 or 45 and above. So forget about the rocks because we can't able to understand. So let us talk about these sands. So for pulverized material like a sand, the maximum this contact angle possible is only 35. That's it. So remain all are lesser than that only. That means if I take any two particles, so the contact between these two, so that is angle of internal friction, shall in no case exceeds 35. No case exceeds, shall not be greater than, so 35. This is always less than that one. Now again imagine, so this 35 is possible only if above and below particle are of the coarse grained sand. Coarse grained sand. But in reality, so is that really possible? May not be, because you are using the combination of the particles and particle fraction range from as high as 4.75 millimeter to 0.075 millimeter. 0.075 millimeter. So in between, any combination of the particle, so attraction is possible or particle contact is possible. So a few particles may contribute for pi of as low as even 5 degree or 5 to 10 degree or even lesser than that. But if you take the uniform particle sizes, the friction angle is always higher. Or the particles of higher size, then your friction angle increases. As the particle size decreases, your friction angle decreases, meaning thereby the angle made of the contact surface, so the angle with which the contact surface made varies depending upon the particle size. Now you can also imagine. So what happens if a sand particle is attached to the clay particle? Will there be any development of the interlocking? So that is pi. There may be, there may not be, depending upon again the applied normal force. So since on the clay particle electrostatic force exists, so under dry condition, so they may exhibit some amount of the friction, the amount of some interlocking, small amount of interlocking under dry condition. But under wet condition, so it may be completely absent, because the moment this sand particle is adhering onto the clay particle, so because of the electrostatic force and because of the presence of the water, so there may be slippage of particles between coarse grain and the fine grain, or the clay and the sand. Slippage may be possible. So slippage of particles. Okay, when there is a slippage, there is no development of interlocking force. In that case, so the angle of internal friction is almost zero. Now just imagine. So this all discussion is based on only the coarse grained soil. Coarse grained soil. Now what if in case of the fine grained soil? So can interlocking exist in case of the fine grained soil? So just imagine, so this is a clay particle and this is another clay particle. So first of all, because of the formation of the diffusion double layer, so when you apply the normal stress, because of the diffusion double layer, no two clay particles have a perfect physical contact because of the diffusion double layer. That is not possible. So therefore, the attraction always between the electrostatic layers only, or the attraction is always between the diffusion double layers only. And if you take pure clay, say for example bentonite, or clay with more than 90% of the clay fraction, or the clay particles are less than 2 micron size, in that case, so the friction angle might become zero. And if you keep on adding a small fractions of maybe silt or maybe sand to this clay, then your angle of internal friction keeps on increases. That's why for a few soils, so it might be reported as 5 degree, 6 degree or 4 degree, or few soils it will be reported as 10 degree, 15 degree, 20 degree. And if you look at in general for coarse grained soils like a sands, the value is always represented more than 20 and up to maybe 35 or depending upon any value. Okay, so now this understanding is very crucial when you pass out and join in any company as a geotechnical engineer. Suppose if somebody reports a angle of internal friction of 30 degree for clay, so it is absurd. It doesn't make any sense. Similarly, so the reverse. It's a pure sand, maybe more than 90% of the particle fractions are the sand, but they reported angle of internal friction of say maybe 5 degree or less than 5 degree. So that is also not possible. Okay, so based on this fundamental concept. Okay, so now you now understood. So the combination of cementation plus electrostatic force, which is represented in the form of the cohesion, and the angle with which two particles make a contact, that is always represented in the form of a interlock. So this particle is interlocked with this particle with this particular angle. Okay, so the combination of these two is designated as the shear stress or the shear strength of the soil. So this is the basic funda behind your shear strength. So any questions?
Sir, is the cohesion due to electrostatic force apparent cohesion or a true cohesion?
Apparent cohesion and true cohesion. See, nothing to do with that apparent cohesion. So that true cohesion with electrostatic force. Whatever the value in general reported is called as apparent cohesion. Apparent cohesion. True cohesion, normally we say about the true cohesion value, but it is rarely possible. Unless you take some uniform soil with a particular size, particular fraction, or of the same type. So there are under certain conditions it is possible. Like when you do the some kind of a calibration of anything. So calibration means again it is also reading. Okay, but for calibration purpose we take some standard material. So in those when you determine the friction or cohesion in that standard materials, that may be called as a true cohesion or the true angle of internal friction. But which otherwise in general, whatever the value that is reported is apparent value.
Sir, in case of sand, pseudo cohesion is used the term. What is that, sir?
That pseudo cohesion is, see, say for example, I may be correct, I may not be correct also. Just try to imagine. That is particularly something to do with your cementation effect. Suppose if the cementation is because of the naturally occurring due to the chemical bonding of calcium carbonate, that is called as a true cementation effect. True cementation effect. But often what happens is there is sometimes some say this is one sand particle and this is another sand particle. If you apply a strong normal force for predominantly longer time, so although these particles are the granular, but they still maintain the contact. That may not be possible only with the two particles, but if you take some amount of the soil mass, and you apply some normal force for a particular longer period, then they maintain some kind of intactness as a mass, as some certain volume. Okay, so that's because of the static cementation effect, we can say. Static cementation effect. That can be also referred to as your pseudo cementation effect. Pseudo cementation. Right. There may be other reasons also for pseudo cementation effect, but this could be one of the reasons.
Okay, sir. It may be due to your water, sir.
It may be due to water, yeah. It may be due to water, or it may be due to the surface tension.
Okay, sir.
Yeah, good. So any other question? Okay, so I will leave it here. So maybe we can discuss about much more things on the shear strength theory. So from again tomorrow. So tomorrow's class.